It's Nights of Cabiria in under 7 minutes.
Cazzi, mambo numero 26!
I want to say that there's this realistic tenderness, not to say neo-realism, but there is a kind of almost closer to poetic realism, tendency to treat this individual character of Cabiria and somewhat the sex workers world with a almost journalistic sense of representation. And I think that's what Paolo Pasolini probably brought to the table, was that he really spent his time amongst these people. He really was I mean, he kind of liked to slum it. He was homosexual, so he was predominantly just wasn't was a bit of, for those who didn't see the Oscars this year, who haven't seen the movie Anora by Sean Baker. It's a film that's directly in conversation with Nights of Cabiria. Plot wise, it's essentially the an entire film about the main plot of Cabiria and Oscar. You know, this guy that just seems too good to be true, who asks her to marry him and take her out of this life that she's not happy with, but at the same time, she's worked very hard for. You know, she's worked very hard for her little apartment. She gives it up. She gives up everything to be with this guy. And up to a certain sense, that was missing for me a little bit in Anora. It took me getting through half of the film before I really got into Anora, and it kind of clicked for me. At first, I was like, "Oh God, this is going to be like just a movie about a bunch of kids getting high at the mall and then going to Las Vegas because there's a Russian oligarch." I didn't see where that was going, and then when it kind of emotionally got me involved, Anora really worked. But I look at Fellini's Nights of Cabiria, and it feels like it makes good on that contract with the audience in the first few minutes of the film. You know, it justifies why we should be interested in a character like Cabiria, who's prickly and I mean, Gulietta Masina just brings her to life with these amazing actress brushstrokes that you can see echoes of maybe Jessamina even in Cabiria, or vice versa. I loved Anora, and I think it's really interesting that the Oscars are kind of returning to uh, neo-realistic tendencies, or really Sean Baker has been that's been something that's been brought up as early as, well, I mean, it's not that early, but is Tangerine, or the Florida Project, with the first film Tangerine, which was shot all on iPhones and had to do with trans sex workers. I mean, really a wonderful film, and it was produced by the Duplass brothers, who saw the brilliance in it. But Sean Baker was making these incredibly intimate, dramatic films, but they were so on point, and they seemed to capture something really tender and American. And I don't see anyone else really kind of foraying into that that kind of storytelling right now. And this year's Oscars really kind of shook me out of that way of thinking and made me kind of do a double take and think there may be really a lot more interesting going on right now in film than in a really long time. And I really admire Sean Baker for being out in the kind of front lines, as it were, of the filmmaking war, really dedicated to something that he loved doing. And I don't think that he ever thought that he would end up winning Oscar for Best Picture. And I think it really says something about who we are as a country and where we are as a culture. And watching Nights of Cabiria and seeing the kind of resonance and rhyming ending in Anora. Both of these films have the plot structure is certainly not going to be an accident. A director like Sean Baker is so sharp and has already spoken about his fondness for Fellini in the past. A very predominantly drawn on tier after Cabiria has really had this devastating ending. We think it's over for her. We think it's done, and then she has this kind of moment, this beautiful moment of grace, which again is this kind of rhyming ending that's been discussed with Anora. There's a lot in common in these films. These films have a lot in common, both content-wise, the way they're framed, and at the same time, I wouldn't get caught up with it much beyond that. I think that Sean Baker's an auteur, and he's certainly doing his own thing. I just think it's really cool that he's aware enough to to make the nod and to make the gesture as a director. He's well versed. This guy knows his stuff, and that's really cool to see. And I just think it's really cool to see audiences responding to these kinds of films. And I've noticed it lately. Some of the really good movies I've watched lately, like Presence by Steven Soderbergh, it could have been shot in pretty much any house in Middle America, anywhere, and it's carried by the strength of its script and its actors alone. And it's got no special effects or craziness. It invites you into this totally different experience, and I think that that's what movies are capable of doing.
Voglio farti niente! Non voglio più vivere! Non voglio più vivere! Ammazzami! Ammazzami! Non voglio più vivere!
It's a masterclass in acting watching Gulietta Masina in anything, but particularly I think in these two films, they're just about the best performances you'll ever see. I mean, she really just nails these characters. And I know that Fellini was well known to be a very permissive director, and there was a lot of improvisation that happened. But he was apparently toughest on his wife, and really demanded the most from her performances from anyone's. And I think maybe that was maybe to be fair, or maybe that's just how their professional working life was. But however it worked amazingly for both of them. I think they brought the best out of each other as artists. And Cabiria is so vibrant and alive on like every level. You know, she's just like burning furnace, and that's why your heart breaks for her, because she really does seem to have so much love. She just is waiting to put it somewhere and to give it to someone. And I think that's the grace at the ending. You know, it's not a happy ending as we're used to in Hollywood, but it is this feeling. You know, and again, that tear sort of to me speaks about salvation, not necessarily, not at all in religious terms personally, but it could be taken that way, absolutely. And that's Nights of Cabiria, discussed in under 7 minutes.